Let's see. There's me. Put me down in the corner. I'm just gonna chill for a little minute. Ooh, not that. Typical. There's me. There's full cam. Checkity check, check, checkity check. All right, everybody. Hello. I got a plan. A little bit. Oh, Alex, hi. Thanks for joining me here on the internet. My plan is to think about native mix-ins because, I don't know, it was a little bit of a topic at CSS Day. They are so new that there's not that much going on with them. Miriam, of course, is behind some of it, has a CSS mixins and functions explainer, which says, hello, Sue, has a link to a draft spec, and the draft spec was relatively recent, 2 months ago or so, with Miriam and Tab on the case, so that's extra exciting to me. And it has a bunch of stuff about functions in it. Functions are fun. I'm somehow less excited about functions usually. There are some really interesting stuff. Look at how in a function you use the property result, which is meaningless. It's like a return in a JavaScript function, except for that there's no execution order in CSS. So like they didn't want to call it return because it makes it feel like there is an execution order, and result is more like wherever it happens in here. It could be the first line up here. It doesn't matter. All of it's going to get evaluated, and the one that like wins is the one that gets returned. Like if there was a media query in here or if statements or whatever else, the result that, I don't know, resolves best is the one that gets returned. Anyway, functions is fun, but I was looking in here and I'm like, mixin will pretty much for sure be called @mixin, and there's just like nothing on this whole page for @mixin. So, not super drafted out yet. So, you know, early enough days to think about it. But in Miriam's page, there is stuff about mixin, for example. And I say, I think this is so early that like maybe this stuff changes a whole bunch. But the idea is that you declare it with mixin and then you use a -- thing, which is called a custom ident, which we're seeing more and more in CSS. Who knows if it'll ship where you need a custom ident or not. You know, like there's things that you don't. When you do a keyframes animation, you don't have to use -- you can. But some things you just absolutely have to. There's more and more of that in CSS, like scroll timelines you have to, and anchors, you have to use them, that kind of thing. Let's see if there's more. You know, we can read as well, but sometimes just looking at code is more fun. There's function. Is there more mixin stuff? How many times does mixin show up on this? Because I'm looking for the apply keyword, because it seems like, yeah, you define the mixin and then you apply the mixin with @apply. Okay, so we're starting to see where this is going, but let's back up and see where this came from. certainly came from the world of Sass. Miriam was involved in Sass as well. Sass is ultra popular CSS thing. And so this is one of those things like, well, Sass could do it. Why can't native CSS do it? And it probably can. We probably will get it at some point. I don't know. I don't have any power in this thing. It just seems likely with how fast CSS is moving that we would get it, probably. At Mixin and at apply seems likely. Probably not at include. I mean, I assume they've thought about it at this very basic high level thing already. But this is the kind of thing that worked in Sass. And so you would declare it, you'd give it a name, and then you'd call include on it, and it could have parameters. So in our little pen, I want to save this so we can come back to it. I might even give me like a thoughts.md document as well, so we can write stuff down. We'd go like, it all came from Sass originally. Heck yeah. Sass has at Mixin / at include. Native has at Mixin / at apply. Why the difference? That would just be interesting thing to just know, you know, like, well, I don't know, what was their problem with include? Is it too close? Did less have Mixins? I'll put it on the screen. See, I can do that, Alex. How cool is that, right? No. Maybe. I think it was missing some crucial thing. I think it didn't for some reason, and that there was some way to do it, but it kind of sucked. Makes sense. Or am I just wrong? Weird. You'd use it like an extend, I guess, then. You'd call the selector and then just put parentheses after that. Do I like that? Now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, maybe I like that. Ooh, it's weird, though. It's just you're not being very explicit about it. And it seems like it's kind of a mixture of how extend worked in Sass, which I'm not really that prepared to talk about. Or I'm like, we could, but it's just off topic a little bit. This is how it deals with selectors is a little different. Yeah, pretty weird. So, okay, so what if we are gonna do this? Should we just copy this one? I'm trying to, like, do we write just pseudo code, or do we let's just write regular CSS and like pretend like it works. So this is a Mixin for center. Like, I would use this. I already have my own snippet called My Center, which basically does that. Display grid, place item center. It's just that it does it on the body, so it deals with the height and the margin issue too. It's just something I do so often that I made a snippet for it. But that's not bad. This is a perfect example of a Mixin where you need two things. It's like Mixins are less useful when it's one thing, because then it's like just use the one thing. You're not abstracting very much. But as soon as it's like a block of stuff, which could have nesting as well, you know, there's no reason that you can't do this kind of thing. I don't know what we'd be selecting here. But then you get not only these key value pairs, these declarations, but you get the whole declaration block, which is kind of cool, I think. So we could put that in the thought. Why are Mixins useful at all? Is like it, you know, abstracts away a whole declaration block. Block can even be nested, which is nice. Yeah, cool. Why else is it interesting? Oh yeah, this is just demonstrating if you were to call it on page, it's the same type of thing as having these properties then put down here. And that's what would happen in Sass, except remember Sass just turned into CSS before it got to the browser. And so what the browser actually saw when you were using Sass would be these two declarations there. It would just be pre-processed into place. Whereas in this world, it just stays as at apply center content. It's just the browser can just know how to do it on the fly. And the question is that cool? Because part of this situation is, and I'm not sure I'll have any influence, but I know what they're interested in is, will browsers decide to work on this at all? And one of the reasons they would decide to do it is if it can do stuff that SAS couldn't. It doesn't mean they'll never do it if it's just like one-to-one with something like what SAS could do, but they'd be less inclined to. They'd be like, oh, you can kind of already do that. You don't get that much out of moving this to the browser unless we can like put together some use cases or something and be like, this is better. And this is a very minor one, but it does feel a little bit like it's cool that we're saving some lines of code. So maybe that's a section is like, why would native mixin be better than pre-processed mixins? That's weird when you hit return, it gives you 2 spaces. Doesn't that make it not even in the same list in Markdown? Less code, question mark? It is a little bit less code. Yeah. And then I want like things to note about native mixins. Are they going to force custom ident usage? And I'm in camp they probably should, but it's just an interesting thing to wonder about. So we don't need that for now. Let's yeah. So that is like one isolated little demo. What's another use case that is a little bit, I don't know, fancier or something? What is one where nesting would matter, or that it's just like obviously useful, where you'd need to do the children as well, like at mixin? Like what's something with Flexbox you always have to deal with the children, right? Flexmax or something, and then what it would do is display flex, but then all the children, let's say, are flex 1. Because you kind of have to say that. Okay, so that's children, and then like the header, whatever, in the navigation is apply -- flex max. Like that's stupid, but at least we're demonstrating now. All right, so let's just make notes. Demonstrating basic usage. Fine. This is demonstrating nested usage. And what I guess what would be interesting about this is if we're demonstrating nested usage, it could be like, well, sure, you're using it in the header, but you could also do it in like news items where you'd call it apply flex max, but like the flex direction is a column or something. So you're still, you're using what it basically does, but you still have power to override things, which does bring up the case like, what if flex direction was set in here? Row? Does this override it? Does the source order matter here? Probably. That's like questions though. Does source order matter in overriding what you get from the mixin? I would think these things are probably covered in the extensive README. Right, but this demonstrates like the point of a mixin is that you can call it under totally different circumstances sometimes. So that's cool. Let's see, Alex, you're wondering about applying multiple mixins. Is that how you would do it? That seems unlikely to me. You'd probably just call it twice. But Is there a use case for that? Maybe. I don't know. We'll put that in questions. How do you apply multiple mixins? And then we could just be like, one, it's like at apply mixin 1, mixin 2. And 2 is just call it twice. Yeah. And then we'll put why less code. Yeah, fair enough. I've seen this syntax a little bit recently in the, what was it? Position try has code that looks like that, although I think they're comma separated. Like position try has that syntax. Position try. But that's at position try. We need this position try. See this? It has, oh, they are comma separated, but it is similar like that. Comma separated thingies. Okay, sure. That's cool. Now we have to do, let's do another obvious one, which is params. In Sass, you got params. There's no reason you can't have params here. And I'm thinking this is probably the #1 use case why doing it in the browser is better, but let's find out. So mixin, let's do like a classic, and let's just assume custom ident usage. Scroll bars, which would take like a track color and a thumb color. Isn't that how that works? Now, immediately you're like, well, how does this work? Should those be custom idents too? How do they express themselves down here? I don't know. This time we might actually, let's bolt for the explainer so far. Is Miriam talking about? Yeah, an argument list. An argument list. Here's one. So they are custom idents, but they'd be, ooh, and they're typed too. How fascinating. I would think that would be appropriate. Yeah, but aren't these supposed to have angle brackets around them? Or no, they're not, because they're used in the parenthesis type, not the string type. Ooh. Yeah, and then you'd use it like you would a custom property from the outside. But it kind of implies that they are like privately scoped. Because like what happens if from color is defined like at the root or something? Does it interfere in here somehow? I don't know. Probably not, right? Because how would it? Like the scope is already this scope. So maybe it doesn't matter that much. But I did hear there's some kind of chit chat about the scope. Oh, look at a trailing comma too. Can CSS even handle that? Okay, but we'll do this. And so now we've learned that these got to be custom idents or whatever custom properties is probably appropriate to say here. And then what was the syntax? Type is a color here. They're both type color. What I was picturing is like when you do at property thingy, you got to go like type is color or whatever, right? It's something like that with the brackets, which is weird but fine. But now you don't have to do it here. Why not? What's wrong with the brackets? Oh my God, my syntax highlighter does not know what to do with that mess. Yeah, fair enough. And then you use them, and this would be a reason to do this mixin at all, is that, let's see, where's my, I need to look at an example. I know I'm probably not sharing it all the way correctly, but we have scroll bar color. Oh yeah, it's just one property, right? It's just scroll bar color, and then it uses both of them, I guess. Let's get it right. Scroll bar color it's one is first, right? Which one is first? Thumb, then track. So let's put thumb first so that it feels good. I don't know what to say about that trailing comma. I would add it to questions, but I don't want to sound stupid. But it does make me curious. Like, at what how much of the syntax can you screw up before CSS like totally bails on it? Would be interesting. So then we got to use var. We got to use thumb color first, and then var track color second. Fine. Not much of a mix-in yet. Right? Part of this thing's like, you know, isn't it? Can't you in JavaScript? Sure, I'm sure you can. Can't you like you set the fallback like up here? Be like, well, it's red if you don't get one, but maybe you don't need to do that because you can do it here. But then you have to do it over and over. So it does seem like, you know, with params, is there value in setting defaults in the arguments rather than during usage? It somehow seems unlikely that we would get that. It's really like complicating this syntax, which is already probably pretty tricky in CSS. Okay, but as we know, that's the newfangled way, and the way we could write a mix-in, and this makes it actually kind of nice, is that you'd go like, what if you're in a browser that doesn't support the newfangled ones yet, which I think is some browsers. I think we're still in that position. We could have a supports query that will figure out what it is, and then we would put, what do you put? The old school ones, right? And then you have to put it on the selector that you called the mixin in. So I think you would need the ampersand. So can you just use like a raw ampersand like that, implying that it's just whatever the parent is? I think you would need to, because what I'm trying to do is like WebKit scroll bar or whatever. And this is immediately making this mixin actually kind of useful. Although it's like, because this hasn't even shipped yet, by the time this ships, will there be any browsers left that need this? It's one of those kind of situations in CSS, I'm afraid. Fair enough. Okay, but dash WebKit scroll bar, and then we have to do it its weird way, right? Where the scroll bar is then you just set the, what do you even do on it? I think you don't even need that. What you need is track and thumb. You'd need track and then another one for WebKit scroll bar thumb. And these are just background colors. Background color is this Deuterino. Oops, this is track. Okay, cool. And then how do you test support for that? Is there something reasonable to do there? I'm trying to see how SAS would do it. Can you just, oh, how fascinating. There's a selector function. Let's see if we can see the documentation. Selector function, which you can use with @supports. Supports, find selector. Yeah, look at that. So you just selector, and then you use the weird WebKit one inside the selector function. That's like good to know, right? Selector, and then you put the weird selector in here. Do you have to quote it? I already forgot. No. Why would you quote it? That would be weird. So you put that bad boy in there. It seems a little backwards though, because you're like, why would you call @supports on the old school one? Shouldn't you like just do these? And then, yeah, that it should be backwards. We're going to put these out here. So like just apply them. And then in browsers that don't support them, who cares? They'll just be ignored. And then in browsers that supports this, which we don't need a selector for. I mean, I want to comment that out because it's actually kind of interesting looking, but we don't actually need it. So if we comment that out and then put at supports. All we really need here is scroll bar color, whatever, red. Then do this. And I think that's... we're not actually even testing this because we can't test it unless you turn SAS on or whatever, but we're testing syntax that doesn't even exist. So it doesn't matter that much, but I think if you're in a browser that supports this and then you use it, it like wipes out these, which I think is okay. It's just one of those things that I would probably document in this code so that people finding it would do it. But this is already kind of demonstrating the value, I think, of Mixins nicely, because it's like a big chunk of crap. It's very likely that if you were really doing this in an app, there'd be like way more of this code. You'd be like doing more. I'd be double or triple the amount of length. You know, the examples I'm seeing are way more. Not to mention, you'd probably do, because there's also the scroll bar width, right? Let's do it the modern way anyway. So we would just be like width, and that's of type size. Great. Then here you'd be like WebKit scroll bar, and you'd set both the width and height to width, because it's just how you had to do it. It's like if it's a vertical scroll bar, it just gets, the height just gets ignored, that kind of thing. Width. Height is width, which I know is weird, but it's really just the size, the girth of the scroll bar, whether it's horizontal or not. But then down here, this gets interesting, because you'd send in width of 10 pixels or something, but that's not how it works in the new world. It's scroll bar width, and it's just thin or not, right? Or width, scroll bar width. I think it's just thin or not, thin or bust, auto, thin or none. So it's like, what would you do? Could we do this with an if statement in CSS? Is that a thing? CSS if statement. I have barely written any of this stuff. Oops. Oh, that's going to be hard to Google because conditional rules. No, there's not going to be. We need to be really specific. I'll put the parentheses after it because it's going to be hard to Google for, because lightly poking CSS tricks is on the case just a week ago or something. I just need an example. So do you have to use a custom property like that? That would be okay. We could do that. You have to use a style query though, and then you say if so is the colon imply that it's exactly equal? You can't do like greater than or anything, can you? Let's see. If container query, if statement. What kind of if statements can we write? The height is that, or if it's that, or if it's that. Those seem like exact. It'd be cool if you could do comparisons. Well, that's okay. So it's written like if. Oh God, did I already forget? Basically, there's a colon, and then you use supports inside of it, and then style. Oh, you don't need supports. You can just do style. If style dash dash scroll bar width, or no, just width, right? That's how we pass it in. And then how do you say the value? Colon. Let's say we passed in 10 pixels. That's why I want to do the comparison. Then how do you declare the value then? Another colon and an X. Where's the other colon at the end of the, after the style? Where's the end of the if? Way at the end. And then you need an else. I just need to copy this whole thing. It is very hard to, it's not written poorly. It's just hard for me to think about. So if I paste that and say, what we're doing is if width, and then let's say they passed in 10 pixels, then what the value I want to be returned is thin. Else it's auto. That's interesting. So that would be like usage of it's a custom property being passed in, but we're using it in two different ways. And so all of a sudden, like the value of this scroll bars mixin to me is shooting up. Like, look at how fancy this is. But this is what I wanted to do. Like width is greater than 10 pixels or less than or equal to 10 pixels or something. Boy, that looks weird. But that's the deal. All right, did I close this properly? Doesn't this supports needs to get closed before the mixin gets closed? Yeah, okay. So that's a lot. Params is the thing. And then, so why would native mixin be better than process mixins? Well, they're not better, but I think the value is params can be changed and thus re-evaluated in the browser, unlike Sass. So because these are custom properties that you're passing in, so if I have body and I call @apply scroll bars, interestingly, I wonder if I don't have to pass anything. Do these just come in as whatever that CSS version of undefined is? And then if it's undefined, that seems like that would be fine. I hope that's fine. Let's put that as a question though. Are missing params fine? I don't know what fine means, but like it doesn't like nuclearize the entire mixin, maybe. So I could call it that way, or I could pass in just one of them. Ooh, that makes me think about named params. Can we do named params? Because what if you want to pass like the second one but not the first one? How do you do that? Do you have to go nil comma or whatever? Like how do you deal with that? But let's say we're just passing in the first one, which is the scroll bar thumb. We could just be like red, or we could apply scroll bars in a more reasonable way, which is probably something like gray transparent or something. But also, what seems likely to me is that you'd go scroll bars and then you'd pass in var, you know, brand color transparent. And then this is something that Sass couldn't do, is that if brand color changed, that it would reevaluate this entire mixin and thus reevaluate the scroll bars look immediately. So I think that would be the advantage. Params can be changed and thus reevaluated in the browser. And Sass can't do that because it's one and done evaluation. So like that one thing alone is like what you'd tell browsers is like, yeah, we should do that because then they behave like custom properties and that they cascade and reevaluate and all that stuff. Like just that value alone is better. It'd be cool to think of one more though. I'm not sure what the one more would be. So let's look at what other things that Sass could do. See if there's anything interesting there. Fun fact, mixin names, like all Sass identifiers, treat hyphens and underscores as identical. That means that reset list and reset list with an underscore both refer to the same mixin. Wow, that's horrible. I think. It doesn't feel right anyway. This one, that's how you did params, or they called them arguments. That's probably more correct. And then what does that mean? Oh, wow. You can pass in the property that you're setting by name. That seems highly unlikely that you'd be able to do that in CSS. Ugh. I guess we could include that as a question. It just seems like we already know the answer. Questions. Can we pass in property names as params? The answer is going to be no. Interesting. So here's a use case where, what does that mean? Oh, that's just a weird Sassism where you're really setting background dash image, background dash repeat, background dash position. Why does that exist? Ugh, I don't know that that was a super good idea. Cool. That's pretty. And so we have an if statement. Now that's like almost like a more valuable if statement because it's not just just one value. It can be a block of stuff. So it's like if the width we got passed in was 10 pixels, we wanted to do 5 things instead of just one thing. That's better. I don't know if we're getting if blocks like that in CSS or if the if function can be abused like that. That is one thing I wanted to note in this for sure, is that there's a way that we can kind of do mix-ins already with style queries, and I feel like I want to note that. But in that we could actually write for real, perhaps. Now, I wonder what actual CSS is making of this nightmare. I assume basically everything on this entire page is invalidating when the browser tries to run it, but you know, we'll see. Who knows? There's a way to do a style query. So let's do it like everybody does it, where you rock this and you go, I don't know, big is false. Okay. And then we have like a card. We're going to need a card. It's always a card. It's my only go-to thing. Dot card. Oops. Dot card tab. And there's an H2 that says hi in there. Fine. So we can write a style query here, right? Like at container style big. If it's true, then I don't know, that H2 inside of it is like font size 100 pixels or something. And right now it's not going to be 100 pixels because big is not true. But if we set big to true, it should get bigger. Bigger. So that's one of the ways that style queries can work, but it means that wherever we write this container thing, we can repeat this whole chunk of stuff inside of it like a mix-in. So I just wanted to like leave that as a note that it's like, it's not, that would be a reason why I could imagine a browser vendor being like, well, you don't need mix-ins, just do this. And then this becomes the mix-in. Big equals true is similar to calling like apply make big or something. Like these could be used pretty much identically. Although this is, I mean, it's, you know, it's more limited. You have to use the container syntax. You're only doing, it's not really like the params don't really work, that type of thing. We can already sort of, kind of, a little bit of do this with style queries. Is that what we're calling them? Style queries? It messes me up because I want to write style then or something, because we call when we say container queries, we mean at container. But if we write style queries, what we mean is style like that. Okay, whatever. Interestingly, I also think of container queries as like, oh, well, the card better have a container on it or contain or whatever it is, but it doesn't matter with style queries. You don't need to worry about that. I also think like, if big equals true, can you just set like border 2-pix solid red or something? You also can style the thing that you query, unlike container queries where you could only reach down inside. That's not a limitation for style queries either. So we get the red border and the big, but as soon as this is back to false or anything, it's gone. Right. So yeah, the idea is that you'd also probably call it like this. You'd be like big equals true. You would not apply it up here. And then you'd have 2 cards. One of them is card and one of them is card big. That means that like this is kind of nicely abstracted down here, I guess. It's just one way to think about it. Ooh, look at this. Now we're not getting the border on it. Even though it has the card class, but we did get the border on it when we... What was the difference when we set this up higher? How come we got the red border before and we're not now? I'm like intrigued enough to back up and find out. When we put the big there, did we get it? Oh, you have to say... No. We'll match it though. Does that work? Yeah. Well, that's weird. I'm just going to comment that out because it obviously doesn't exist. So if we set the variable at this level, we get the border on the card. But if we only set it at the card level, we don't get it. Okay, so I guess that sort of kind of makes sense, but I guess it's just another thing I didn't really know. Like, why does it matter where we set this? Because we know this is evaluating to true, but it's like, oh, too late. You did it too soon, so you can't apply the border now. That seems like a weird gotcha that should be documented, kind of. I'm just going to write it down here. If you set the custom property here, the border works. That is a weird gotcha. So it is a little bit like container queries where you can't style the thing that you query if you set the custom property at the same level. But if the custom property is set up one level higher than you can, that's almost worth a mini blog post right there. That is strange. Okay, so yeah, whatever. I think if I was going to write something about this, I would mention something about style queries and that they are a little bit Mixin like, if you ask me. So let's go back to this is Miriam's explainer, and let's see if there's anything interesting in here we would want to think about. Already that is interesting, and I hadn't really thought of it. Doesn't have it. It might look something like this. So now we're setting these in here, and I think this is the moment where you're like, are these private? In the sense that there's no real way to reach in and do anything with them or something. I'm not super sure what I mean, but I know Miriam has like a thought about whether custom properties are kind of behave a little differently from an access perspective inside of a mixin. And then why would you need that? I mean, result is the same as function, so that's cool. But like I would think this does the same thing if you just got rid of these two lines. Like it's just going to return this stuff. Oh, I guess that's what it means, is that like if you put these properties up here, does that mean that they get like hoisted up out of this? So when you call the mixin, now there's this more global custom property that you've declared on the parent thing called -- background. But if you like didn't want that to happen, maybe that's what this is about. And the fact that they're not in here means that they are kind of private to this mixin. That is interesting. Okay. How would CSS native mixins differ from preprocessors? Well, we're kind of trying to answer that in our thoughts a little bit. What are the two things we have so far? Less code and the params reevaluating. What extra functionality or limitations come from providing these features in the browser? From a language implementation perspective, mixins and functions are entirely distinct features. They live at different levels of syntax and come with different complications. If we pursue both, we likely want to define them at different levels of a specification or even in different specifications, which has not happened so far, right? Because this thing immediately links to a thing where they're combined. But I tend to agree. They feel super different to me. Interesting. Removing their reliance on preprocessors would further simplify maintenance. I mean, I guess that's like enough right there. Like, why? One of the answers is so you don't need a preprocessor. The extra tool, we'll call it. That's a pretty decent reason all by itself. Agreed. Passing cascaded custom properties as arguments is interesting. Absolutely. So where you call a mixin in one place, the mixin could do something different than it does in another situation. That's true in Sass as well, though. So it's not it might be, it's a bit different though, because in the browser, a variable could be different because it's position in the DOM or something that you did with JavaScript, for example, whereas Sass is just be like, well, it's just because you called it differently. But that is interesting, right? Why is it different? Is that params as custom properties means Mixins can do different things based on DOM position and JavaScript intervention in a way that a preprocessor can't do. It's the same kind of thing as just like, hey, the params can change and thus it reevaluates. But it's interesting that you don't have to like really explicitly change those custom properties. Custom properties can be different just because of the cascade or because JavaScript reached in and did something about it. Author interest. Yeah, I suppose that's the kind of thing that Miriam has to do now, is like dig up statistics and crap instead of, we just like to wing it around here. Just think of stuff. No, that's great. Reusable styles. Random. Okay, some stuff about parameters. Let's read that. That should be interesting. Both functions in Mixins rely on a parameter list. Is there already precedent for parameter list? What other things in CSS do that? I mean, I guess any function can do that. It's just interesting that these are like user-defined functions, which seems like new territory. Like even stuff like, are the params comma separated? I mean, almost surely they will be, but it's like when you're defining something from scratch, it could be, who knows how you do it, you know? Like the color functions in CSS have a slash at the end of them for the for the opacity for whatever reason, because there needs to be a differentiation between that and the other ones that you pass in, I suppose. But could you use a slash? Is a slash interesting in here somewhere? What would it do, you know? Oh, they do have default value in here with the space. So there's type and default values. Okay, so that question got answered already. Remember, we were like, oh, maybe, but why would you need it when you could just do it later? Again, this is just Miriam thinking out loud, but. Oh, interesting. Since this list is comma separated, this would require better handling of arguments with commas. I'm somehow not surprised that arguments with commas is complicated and hard in this. I sort of suspect it's because of how permissive the values of CSS custom properties are, that like a custom property could just be a comma, you know, and then how does that complicate things? Probably somewhat. And this is function stuff, which is fine, but we're less interested in that. Could a function call a mixin? Probably not, because it just returns a value, whereas mixins like return too much stuff. But I would think a mixin could call a function, right? I guess that's worth writing down. That's like a weird thing. A function probably couldn't call a mixin, but a mixin could call a function. Yeah, that's funky. You know, so I think Sass kind of cared about source order. Does source order matter? Like if the last thing that in your entire CSS is a mixin, but you've already tried to apply it as the first line of your CSS or second or whatever, is that fine? Does CSS care? Probably not, you know? I mean, JavaScript certainly would, but does it slow it down in some meaningful way? Not sure. So parameter, oh, we already read some of this stuff. Clear fix being a good example. Yeah, so that, you know, Miriam is thinking that you can use an ampersand, and that would just be like the selector of whatever thing called it. That seems obvious, but it's kind of cool. Apply it with the name. Seeing if there's anything like interesting in here that we haven't seen yet. There's them private variables. Very interesting. And then, oh, here's an example of these are private and these aren't. Like now that if you call this on some selector, then that selector has access to this new thing, dash dash gradient. That's kind of cool. Private, not private. A clear fix mixin has no exposed parameters and no internal logic. When the mixin's invoked, it will output the same code every time. Don't repeat yourself. Static mixins are just utility things. Yeah, absolutely. And I really just have a million of them. Even looking around in my old code base, like we have a special one for styling drop downs and definitely a clear fix one that we probably don't even use anymore. But like there's like a special one to style a header in a certain way, which sets the colors and deals with dark modes and has a border on the bottom of it and stuff. And it's kind of nice to be like, oh yeah, I have this header selector somewhere. Just call that mixin on it because I want it to look like those other kind of headers. I have one for centering, one for inputs with errors on them. Yeah, I think those are what Miriam is talking about here. Is the dry kind, the static ones. And in fact, if that was the only use case for first launch, that might be okay. As it seems like you could ship that and then ship the parameter stuff later, possibly. Ooh, talks about style queries as well. Interesting. Built-in conditions. Yeah, like you can nest stuff like that in there. To me is like, that's a lot of the value of a mixin, is that you get this logic crap right once, and then every time you call the mixin, it's like, God, I've already thought about the hard part. I'm just going to use the mixin. That seems like perfectly fine. Cool. Nested stuff. The most common reason to use a function or mixin is the ability to define parameters that alter the output based on different input. Yeah, absolutely. So parameter conditions. Ooh, that we have not seen. When? And that's what we were looking for before, because that's what we wanted. That's what I wanted for that if block. So at when arg when the arg is that, then do this, and you can set multiple things. So let's look at what was I doing with that here. So the other way to write that would have been at when arg width is, and that this comparison thing was really just wishful thinking. But the fact that you passed it in as a size does make me feel like you should be able to do that. So I'm going to put it here. When, then you could go scroll bar width thin. And that like reads nicer than this does to me. Yeah, I like that. Alternate. And then does that opens the door for an else or something, right? Yeah. Might as well document that too. And we should, I don't want people to think I'm like just stealing what Miriam has done here. We're just thinking about it. Base that, just apply a little credit where credit's due here. Scroll bar width auto or whatever. Yeah. I like that. This syntax is fake though. All the syntax we've seen so far has a colon instead, which I think is much more limiting. But that's neat though. And you can do multiple of them. Yeah, that's cool. Imperative control flow. Some use cases require more complex flow control, such as loops. Oh God, that seems like, I pretty much heard it from browser people that loops is just not happening. I mean, this is just Sass. So what is he going to say about that? I think it would be reasonable to draw a boundary here. CSS is a declarative language, and adding imperative flows would luckily cause confusion. So she's saying, nope, no loops, which is just what I said. Detailed discussion. I want to get into this, but we're getting long in the tooth on this, aren't we? Are people into this? Is this interesting in any way? A few more minutes, I suppose. A return syntax helps distinguish the final return value. It's not a property, but it looks like one. Yeah, it feels like that's a maybe, that whole at result thing. Remy proposed setting a custom property with the same name as the function, and that property is treated as the resulting value. Oh, that would be for functions, not Mixins. That's weird, but I don't understand the whole thinking of that. Passing nested content to Mixins. Oh, what is that? That's a new thing we haven't thought of yet. Oh, I see. So when you apply it, you get these extra parens and you can pass the whole chunk. Why? It's like if you just want this content, why don't you just put it there? Or, I mean, I guess, or you're writing this abstract thing. It's a little bit, it's like you get a lot more mix-in by just calling one thing. Yeah, maybe. Wow, I find it hard to wrap my mind around that a little bit. So you're calling this, and the goal of calling this is that you're trying to write a media query that's big and fancy. It just seems like an alternative to a custom media query here, but maybe there's other use cases that would be stronger somehow. I do need to note that though, so I don't forget about it. Not that I have any goal for this document. I just want it to be like all the interesting thoughts. And then can you do that in Sass too? Can you, when you call a Sass thing, I don't know if you can. I think you'd have to put it as a param. So this would be like it's almost in the category of something cool that it can do better than Sass could do. The apply syntax. It's almost like slotting is, something Sass can't do. So it would be apply thing. It could have params, but you also can give it like children. It's totally not the right word, but it's something like that. Interesting. That's function stuff that we kind of don't care about. Function stuff. Extend would be a whole other conversation. I almost think it's like easier and more valuable almost. But I'm not ready to think about that right now. My brain is very full. Functions be chained. Keyframe based mixins. What does that mean? It doesn't seem directly related to Mixins though. This does. Alan has pointed out conversations that this is very Mixin-like behavior. Oh, I see. It just means it's just one more thing to think about, I guess. Oh, interesting. This is tab writing in 2017. Why he bailed on it? This would be an interesting read probably. I don't know that we have time for it, but I also wouldn't doubt that like 8-year-old blog posts have changed quite a bit in the time. So much has happened in CSS. Not that it wouldn't be a very interesting read, but wow, there is a lot to think about with this stuff. I almost want to scope it to just like, what do I care about as an author? It's not like I don't care about how it interfaces with keyframes or something, but it's a little outside of my normal thinking. Like I want the basic use cases to be covered and covered well before I'm terribly worried about what they do to a keyframe. So I think that's probably good enough. I'm definitely gonna have to circle back to this a number of times and maybe put together some demos that'll be like, see, this would be cool. And doesn't it seem like theming would be the thing? I mean, here I am in the new CodePen editor here, where we are supporting at least light and dark themes in the whole editor. Like light and dark is like not a fad no more. And like, would I benefit from, like, when this changes, what's happening is a whole bunch of custom properties are changing, and those custom properties could be params to mixins, and those mixins help with dealing with these things. I don't doubt that if we had mixins, we would be using them in some way to handle this type of thing. And I don't know what that is yet, but it's probably worth writing up to some degree. Yeah, cool. That's Mixins. Wow, my brain is just really full on that. So I'm gonna save this pen, and we're just probably gonna circle back to it. This is my last stream this week, I think, because I'm gonna go visit my family next week in Wisconsin. It's gonna be real nice, and I'm not gonna bring any sort of casting rig to my parents' house. Just not gonna happen. I'm just gonna enjoy my sister's pool, and it's gonna be great. Thanks all for hanging out, and I'll see you, I don't know, the Monday of whenever I'm back, which is not next week. Be good. You're great.